Hello, you absolute legends. Trackmania is in my opinion one of the greatest racing games of all time. It's a relatively simple racing game, but the mechanics make the game a real treat to play, and these mechanics are just complex enough to produce a host of emergent techniques and strategies that give competitors enough depth to really sink their teeth into. Trackmania seems perfectly designed for time trials, and because the game is so beautifully well made, it has facilitated a bustling competitive scene for well over a decade. Players sometimes spend hundreds or even thousands of hours on a single track, trying to achieve the perfect line. And because that perfect line requires such immense precision and is so hard to actually attain, it allows the true skills of players to adequately shine. Those that can control their car better and can produce lines that are closer to optimal will get a faster time than those who can't. And this is what makes competition in Trackmania so great. But over the past couple of years, a new kind of strategy has begun to emerge, and it's a style of play that seems to spit in the very face of the spirit of the game. This new strategy seeks to strip away almost everything that makes the game great, and the problem is that this new method seems to work. By using custom-built tools and brute force, you can let a computer distill a run down to just a handful of inputs. You can figure out the perfect sequence and timing of keyboard presses that would produce the fastest run in the fewest amount of inputs. Now, instead of trying to control your car as best you can, all you need to do is memorize just a few inputs, hit them at the right time, and you'll achieve a new record. In fact, this method is so simple, you could literally do it without even looking at your car. You can just watch the timer, hit the buttons when you know you're supposed to, and the game then becomes less like a racing game and more like a rhythm game. This new strategy has already resulted in one of the most famous world records in the game's history being beaten with relative ease, and this is surely just the beginning. This raises an important philosophical question. What really is the point of Trackmania competition? Is it just to get the fastest time, no matter what or how? Or is it to see who the best racer is when playing the game as intended? Ultimately, after causing much of a stir, this controversial new strategy was banned from use on the competitive leaderboards. But the reason it was banned is probably different than what you would think. In this video, we will take a quick look at this new strategy, and it would be very interesting to know your thoughts as well. Does this ruin the game, or is it just another valid way to play? I really hope you enjoy. Now legends, I am super excited because this video has an amazing sponsor. AG1 is a daily foundational nutrition supplement that supports whole body health. AG1 is jam-packed with so many high-quality ingredients that are essential to good health, like vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, probiotics, and many more. As you guys know, I'm dealing with a lot of stress right now leading up to my trial next month, so I've been trying to stay as healthy as possible by trying to sleep more, eating better, exercising, and taking AG1 every day. AG1 supports stress recovery, your immune system, gut health, and it also enhances focus and energy. I've tried other powdered greens in the past, but they always tasted terrible, which is why I could never keep them up. But I can honestly say AG1 is by far the best tasting I've ever had. I recommend having it first thing in the morning. It's such a positive way to start the day. If you value your health, please try AG1 today. Just click my link in the description or scan the QR code on screen and get a free welcome kit with your first subscription. This includes a year's supply of vitamin D3 plus K2, 5 AG1 travel packs, a steel canister, and a pretty cool shaker as well. Trackmania is a deterministic game, meaning that if you do the exact same inputs, you'll achieve the exact same results. This is important when it comes to verifying replays to make sure they aren't cheated, but in normal play, this really doesn't seem to apply. No one can play perfectly, so you're never going to do the same run twice. When steering with a joystick, there are over 100,000 possible input values, and the game is responding to your inputs 100 times per second, so it's just quite frankly impossible to perform the same run twice. And even the slightest difference in inputs can result in pretty significant deviations. This is one of the things that makes Trackmania competition so great. It rewards precision, and because perfect precision is essentially impossible to achieve, the competitive ceiling is never reached. Unless, of course, you're using a keyboard, in which case things are different. With a keyboard, steering inputs are binary. They are either on or off. This range of over 100,000 possible values for steering simply disappears. This makes things much simpler. Mind you, this isn't an advantage, because having the ability to steer by a specific amount is better for precise driving, and this is why the majority of world records on official tracks are performed using a controller. But this simplicity of input values has ultimately produced a new type of strategy that has caused a bit of a ruckus. It's called Low Input Strat, or LIS, and it can only be performed on a keyboard. The earliest example of LIS being used is on the track D10 race, which involves taking a shortcut over the left wall near the start. This skip is very precise if you want to do it quickly, and therefore it's usually very inconsistent. However, players found that if you don't press anything at the start of the race, and then just press and hold left at exactly 1.83 seconds, you'll get over the wall every time. This perfectly encapsulates the spirit of LIS. It's finding the lowest possible amount of inputs on a keyboard to achieve a goal. The YouTuber Beta produced a fantastic video talking about LIS last year, and if you want more specifics about the history of this style of play, I recommend watching his video as well. But when Beta released his video, this strategy wasn't as controversial as it is today, and this is because back then, it was more or less only used on community-made maps, and it wasn't really being used on official Nadeo tracks. Official Nadeo tracks feature in official Trackmania releases, and were made by the developers of the game. World records on official tracks are far more prestigious. Now that it has bled into official tracks, it became a problem that needed to be addressed. So let's look at the track A12 speed from Nations Forever. In 2019, the racer Havoc achieved a time of 10.61 seconds, which is one of the most famous records in the game's history. Virtual did a fantastic video on the history of this level, which you should check out if you haven't already. But this track involves the use of a trick called the Uber bug, where you hit the side of the track in a very specific way to get launched into the air with a bunch of speed. This trick is extremely precise, and players have spent hundreds of hours playing this level trying to execute this trick, and for the past 5 years, Hefest's record has remained strong. At least until now. Back in 2021, the programming genius Don Adigo created a Trackmania tool that allowed players to manually create runs frame by frame, otherwise known as a TAS. They could program the perfect inputs and then play them back to create amazing, inhuman runs. This really isn't a problem in of itself, because any top player can look at the inputs of a replay and know if it was performed by a human or a computer. It's actually very difficult to mimic the way a human plays, just like it's difficult for a human to mimic how a computer would play. But recently, players have begun to use this same tool to run scripts that makes a computer play sections of a track millions and millions of times to test different possible input combinations, hoping to find one that is both faster and also requires the least amount of inputs. In January of this year, the player Virtuoso used a script that found a way to beat Hefest's world record by only using 7 inputs. All a player had to do was execute 7 frame-perfect inputs and the world record would be theirs. 7 frame-perfect inputs is not a lot. Many games have world records that require far more than this. Then in April, the player Pastor Grows used the tool to find a 6-input solution that would beat the record. And on the 30th of April, he would use this solution to do exactly that. This concept of using brute force and tools to find ways to beat records with only a few inputs raises a couple of concerns. The first is that it fundamentally changes the way people play the game, in that they are no longer actually focusing on driving, but rather memorizing a few inputs and using the game's timer to execute them. I know some people don't mind this and have the attitude that it doesn't matter how you play the game, the goal should just be to get the fastest time you can. And sometimes that's true, but sometimes it does defeat the purpose of competition entirely. The purpose of a competition is to distinguish players based on their skill levels, at least in theory. But if everyone is just memorizing these same 6 inputs and everyone is getting the exact same time, what's the point? It reminds me of my own speedrunning game Perfect Dark. There are 20 levels with 3 difficulties, allowing you to compete in 60 times, and each time allows you to earn 100 points if you get the record. That's a total of 6,000 points available. But in the past, the maximum points you could earn was actually 6,300. That's because there is a bonus level called the Duel, that's outside of the main storyline. When they originally made the ranks, this bonus level was included. On Agent, the world record is 3 seconds, and simply involves turning and shooting once. That's 2 inputs and none of them are even frame perfect. And basically everyone had 3 seconds because it was so easy. It's possibly the easiest world record you could ever achieve. But what's the point? If everyone has the world record is meaningless. And if a level can't distinguish players based on their skill, it's a useless level to compete in. And because of this, the duel was removed as a level you could earn points on. With LIS in Trackmania, every single player will just be trying to do the same 6 inputs and will be achieving the exact same time. This isn't necessarily enough of an argument to ban a technique, but I think it still needs to be considered. On top of this, it's quite literally impossible to know if someone who submits a replay using LIS has cheated. The inputs aren't human inputs by design. No human would ever play like this. So you can't use inhuman inputs as a cheat detection method. And because these inputs are so easy to program, you can't know if someone used a tool to make their replay or if they actually did it by hand. And there are other ways to cheat as well. Tools have been made that reads information from the game in real time and visually shows you when you need to press the inputs. Now you don't even need to look at the timer. You can just press the buttons when the lines line up. In fact, you could use this tool to play the game without looking at the game at all. Now, of course, using a visual tool like this is already against the rules, but the point is that it's impossible to know if someone has used a tool like this just from the replay alone. Maybe you can try to improve cheat detection by forcing players to use hand cams and show their monitors. But even this isn't really enough to prove anything. Players could use a hidden extra monitor to show the visual inputs and you would never know. And funnily enough, a player has already admitted to cheating in this way after achieving a new record with LIS. Ultimately, the Trackmania community decided to ban the use of LIS on the main leaderboards. Yes, it does allow people to get faster times and a lot easier, but there are so many downsides to this way of playing that it doesn't seem to be worth including. However, they did say they will create a separate leaderboard in the future for people who still want to submit LIS replays, similar to how the Mario Kart rankings separate shortcut and non-shortcut world records, which I think is a nice compromise. The decision wasn't unanimous and some people still think it should be allowed, but the feeling I get is that most people see this as something that will only harm the community and competition in general. And I tend to agree. Every competition has rules and regulations to keep competition interesting. Let's take high jump for example. Yes, the point is to jump over as high a bar as you can, but that doesn't mean you can put springs in your shoes to jump higher. The point is to clear the bar using skill, not tools that go against the spirit of the competition, which is why there are restrictions on the types of shoes competitors can wear. When I made the video on the Osu cheater, who used illegal keyboard settings to gain an advantage, some people wondered why it shouldn't be allowed. And it's the exact same concept. You shouldn't be trying to win using tools or an equipment advantage, because it simply defeats the purpose of the competition. Thankfully, LIS in Trackmania is so obvious that it's immediately apparent when someone is using it, therefore moderation won't be difficult, and they have even imposed a minimum input requirement, and won't be accepting replays that use 8 or less inputs. This way you can't simply remember a few inputs a computer gave you, you always have to really play the game. This situation has led to a really interesting debate in the Trackmania community, and I'm curious to know what your thoughts are. So if you have a different opinion, please let us know in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, you legends. I hope you're having a fantastic day, and I will see you in the next video.